I'm lost in darkness, searching for light. Every step forward feels like a fight. Shadows of doubt creep in my mind, but I refuse to surrender. I must find a way to rise above the pain, to overcome, to break the chains. My existence is a test of will. I won't be broken, I'll stand still. The weight of the world crushes me down. Fear and uncertainty all around. But I deep find inner strength to face the trials length by length. A way to rise above the pain, to overcome, to break the chains. My existence is a test of will. I won't be broken, I'll stand still. Through every storm, I'll find my way. Through every night, a brighter day. I'll rise from ashes, like a phoenix born. My spirit unbroken, my heart reborn. I've walked through fire and emerged scarred, but wiser, stronger, and unmarred. My existence is a test of will, of trials overcome, of a soul made bold. The way of the world, above the pain, to overcome, to break the chains. My existence is a test of will. I won't be broken, I'll stand still. Well, made bold. Through every storm, I'll find my way. Through every night, a brighter day. I'll rise from ashes like a phoenix born. My spirit unbroken, my spirit unborn. Day to day, nothing changes. All I want is a moment to think clearly, but thoughts come unrelenting, consuming every waking moment. My mind binds me and I can't escape.
Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to the first ever premiere episode of CJ and Tyler's Weekend Wrestling Roundup. I'm Tyler, the Pro Wrestling Hipster, here with
CJ, the CJ, part of the CJ and Tyler equation. Love doing this stuff. Love talking with you. I have missed doing our weekly Sunday show, so I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been far too long. And, there was, just life would be life in. And then, also with NXT Level Up, which was the focus of our previous show together here on Sundays, is no more. It does appear as though it's going to be living on through Evolve. So, someday in the future, we will again be able to talk about the gatekeeper, Dante Chen, as he
But unfortunately,
Evolve.
But unfortunately, the Level Up adventure has come to an end.
Yes, it was certainly a fun thing while it lasted. Level Up.
Oh yeah,
I will miss it. It's not really gone, but guys, we're
it lives on
That's always, right there, just pumping proudly under the old hot rod banner. But guys, we're here to talk about more than just NXT. Despite what it's saying on the live stream there on the Facebook thing, I did not edit that. This is my first time running this side of this program that we use now. So live radio, y'all. But this is the Weekend Wrestling Roundup, and we're gonna try to cast a much wider net across the world of professional wrestling and discuss, big news stories, just things we want to talk about, maybe sometimes things that fall through the cracks. And we've got a few topics that we want to touch on today as kind of our focus. And then also, odds and ends, because we don't stay on topic super well here at Dirt Sheet Radio. But
you and me in particular.
It's true. It's but that's why they like us, CJ. That's why they tune in and watch us on live and on delay. But before we get in there, yeah, I think that's why. I think it's the fun dynamic that we bring to the internet world. But
right,
before we get rolling, I do have to give our ever-loving, important shout-out to our partners out there on the web, comicbookclick.com. That is comicbookclick.com/DirtSheetRadio for all of your professional wrestling, pop culture, comic book needs, all in one encapsulated little place. So check it out. Make it your homepage just like we do. Look at it multiple times a day. Not because we're legally obligated, but because we truly love to do that. But CJ, we've got a few topics to hit on today. I didn't really discuss what order you wanted to hit these in. So where would you like to begin on this inaugural episode of CJ and Tyler's Weekend Wrestling Roundup with a W?
Well, I think I'd be remiss if we didn't start with one of the biggest kind of dramatic news pieces of the week. You saw it in our thumbnail. Corey Graves is kind of on the outs at the moment. He hasn't reacted well to his quote-unquote demotion back to NXT. And, he was tweeting earlier in the week saying how he, he just wasn't reacting very well to it. You see it right here. And to his credit, I get it. I think that it's very, it's a jarring thing to be like, sorry, you're not actually going to be the guy anymore, especially after being told, he was going to be the guy. So I think that's probably a good place to start. What are your thoughts on the Corey Graves thing?
Well, my initial thought, as with a lot of news stories in wrestling, was, hey, is this real? Is this a legitimate issue? Corey isn't one that shied away from complaining on the internet when he's unhappy at work. This is not the first time he has had deleted tweets or Instagram posts regarding hot button issues in wrestling. And he is cleared to wrestle. So there was a part of me that's like, okay, well, maybe this is how they're going to get him back into the ring. I don't think that's the case. I think this, was a legitimate issue from everything that, is coming out from the interwebs and stuff. It sounds like it is, in fact, a shoot, brother. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't turn into something that becomes more of a story angle if they're able to, come to an agreement and figure things out. I do understand being upset from his perspective. You're a lead announcer. You've been at this for more than a decade now, and he is good. He's good at what he does. But when they shuffled everything, obviously Netflix, they won, the height of commentary. They wanted Michael Cole, and with Michael Cole, you're going to get Pat McAfee. For some reason, I don't understand. Michael Cole loves Pat McAfee. Like, I at this point, I'm assuming that Michael Cole's children on fire or something. Like, I have no idea. But Netflix wants that name recognition. They want Pat McAfee. He is incredibly famous. And WWE management likes the way that Joe Tessitore and Perez work together. And I guess they didn't want to do a 3-man booth on either Raw or SmackDown. So Corey got put back down to NXT to a 3-man booth, incidentally.
Which, I get the not wanting 3-man booths. Like, Netflix feels like it's going to be its own self-sustaining machine as far as like the overall production goes, and I think that's best worked with a two-man booth. I feel like they could get away with it on SmackDown just because it's still on cable, but to do it on NXT instead, I don't know. I don't see the logic behind it. Like because any three-man booth with Booker T, in my opinion, just doing the things that he's doing on NXT currently, it still feels like a two-man booth. You know,
Right.
like you have Vic and Joseph, or Vic and Corey, talking about the NXT whatever's going on TV, and then Booker's just off in the corner going shucky ducky quack quack or whatever the fuck noises he was making during Stephanie
man.
Bear's match on Tuesday. Jesus.
That was
That was
bad.
uncomfortable.
The CW is gonna probably file some sort of injunction, like we're gonna have to start cutting your mic, you sex crazed maniac. Allegedly, I don't know. This is if Booker, you hear that, I'm sorry.
It could have just been like nothing intended sexually at all, but that's definitely how it came across.
It really did. The timing, the cadence, the inflection. It was all there. It was all there. But like that was one of the things I was excited about at the prospect of Corey Graves being on NXT, is that and I love Vic Joseph, but Vic's newer, in the game here, and Book by all accounts, Book's a legend. Corey Graves will stand up to Booker T and literally say, "What the hell are you even talking about right now?" Like he has actually said that to him on air in the past, and I was excited for that because I do feel that Vic Joseph, for as incredible as I feel that he is on NXT, he does let Booker T kind of walk on him, and he's getting a little bit better about that. Where over that, I feel like the past month especially, he has started to give a little pushback on Booker about certain things. Like almost treating Booker in some regards how Jim Ross would treat Jerry Lawler, especially regarding the women talent, where he's talking about Booker T needing to take his blood pressure medication stuff, which is stuff that Jim Ross used to say to the King. But I was excited from that aspect of it, and Corey being this upset. Again, I understand the perception of demotion. But, CJ, you and I have talked about this, how, like, yes, NXT is developmental, but it's being treated increasingly more like a legitimate just third brand of the company, especially with the rebranding of their PLEs to being like WWE, Deadline, So they're really trying to encapsulate that more. Corey would have been shuffled back up to Raw or SmackDown eventually.
He would have easily been covering for Pat McAfee tomorrow if it wasn't for his Twitter outburst.
Yeah, right. And as we saw there, the first one is talking about imagining having a dream, basically being told you're not famous enough for your own job. And yeah, Pat McAfee is, with all due respect to Corey Graves, outside of professional wrestling, Pat McAfee is far more famous, more famous. And Joey Testator, like they paid some money to bring him in from that ESPN family. So like they're going to put that juice behind them right now. But you're absolutely right. He'd be filling in for Pat Monday if not for this outburst. And he was not on NXT this past week, which is a real shame because he was claiming but he was going to have a lot to say that night. And all reports indicated that he was in Orlando. People saw him in Orlando. What we don't know was whether he actually went to the venue and was sent home, or if he just said, F it, I'm not showing up. That's what we kind of don't know. My inclination would be that he was sent home. Even as upset as, like, he seemed to be, I've never really heard someone say Corey Graves is, like, that level of unprofessional, that he would just no-show something he was supposed to be at. So I definitely could have seen them being like, look, clearly you're upset. We don't want to put a live mic in front of you tonight. So go home. Go home. Go hang out with your wife and kid, and let's cool down and maybe try to come to an agreement here.
Because he's been social media silent since then too. Like, if he was really still upset, I feel like he'd have more to say over the course of the week. Like, I don't know if WWE's even just clamped down on his socials, but I'm sure that if he was given the opportunity, he would have plenty to say.
Yeah. Which, and again, was like kind of the shame of that. I was looking forward to at least seeing him like mean mugging the camera all night long, but yeah. So if the issue here is obviously keeping him off television and upsetting him to the point that he's had to delete the tweets he's made. Do you think that they're going to be able to come to an agreement, or do you think this, I mean, he just signed a multi-year deal, last year, the year before last? Like, he's locked in here for several years.
I think that there is a way forward. Like, I think if Vince was still in charge, he would have just cut him loose. But I think that because he's worked with Triple H before and he really has more of a professional respect relationship with Triple H, I think that's really working well in his favor as far as being able to keep his job.
Yeah, he's that tenure helps, and I do wonder if Triple H is a little more understanding about the kind of just frustration and consternation that a lot of the talent have had over the years, just, knowing what it was like working under Vince. I mean, that's his father-in-law, for God's sake. He knows what it's like. And I feel like Triple H is much more, I don't know if lenient is the word I want to use here, but he does seem to be a little softer towards the talent. And I don't know if that's just strictly how Hunter approaches situations, or if that's also influence from the now much larger corporate structure that WWE is under, being part of, TKO Endeavor. So I don't know if that's got an influence or not. Like, maybe, kind of having a larger structure above you, you can't just be like, you know what, screw you, you're fired. Maybe there are more, steps and protocol that have to be met here. But do you think that we will see Corey Graves in a ring again? Is this going to be Corey Graves versus Pat McAfee, with the winner taking the commentary for the undisputed commentary seat? Like,
they need to put a belt on them if they're gonna do that. Just something that Corey can wear draped over his shoulder while he's doing commentary, just to be like, yeah, I fucking earned this chair. No, well, and you said it, like, he was cleared to compete, but that was also like 2-3 years ago at this point, and was that ever even confirmed? Like, I know it was speculated, but yeah. I don't know if it was ever actually publicly confirmed by anybody, like even a Fightful report.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. This is one of those many, many instances where it would be very helpful if we had our commander-in-chief, our editor, Johnny Dirtsheet, sitting in the back room right now, but we're alone, CJ. Just me.
Well, if he's watching live, which, first of all, if there's someone watching this on VOD because they just weren't here to watch it live, that's fine. But man, we have a good time live. If you're not here live, you better have a good reason.
And if it's, the fact that it's Sunday morning, there's a lot of reasons. I feel like people could not be here live on a Sunday morning, but we are. A couple of heathens, me and CJ.
Heathens is the best word for it.
It is. But you're right. So that is kind of a little gray on, whether or not he is, actually like cleared to wrestle. But I don't know. It is an interesting situation. It is legitimate as far as, anyone can tell through any reporting. We'll see what happens going forward. Because, so who is filling in for Pat Monday?
Wade Barrett.
Oh, that probably stings even more for Corey.
Well, I mean, I feel like he, at least now, he's got to have an understanding of what the core problem with his tweet was. Mm-hmm. Like, even Jim Ross came out and said, I've been demoted before. It's nothing that is like it's nothing personal. It's just business.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, Pat McAfee has a much larger international audience, and putting him on Netflix for that is the best use for Pat McAfee. Does that mean that they couldn't have used Corey Graves on SmackDown? No. They just wanted to use him on NXT. And I think part of it is, like you said, they are treating NXT more and more like a proper third brand. So why wouldn't you want the opportunity to continue to build the NXT brand into something that's on par with Raw and SmackDown?
Right, exactly. And like, again, like, and I understand the knee-jerk reaction to feeling like you've been pushed back down, the pyramid. I understand that. But, and again, we're going to look at the situation differently than someone that's as involved as, Corey is. But NXT, as it stands, is the only wrestling program on over-the-air television.
That WWE has.
Yeah. Well, yes, the WWE that has. Well, actually, I mean, as far as major leagues go, I mean, if we're not talking independent, like local promotions, or I'm trying to think if there are any that are on a non-cable network.
Isn't TBS?
No, it's a cable.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure how that worked down in the States.
Yeah, so like there was once upon a time was it WGN, like out of the Chicago area, which was also regarded as a super station. It was an over-the-air channel that was national. But TBS for us here, it's locked in with cable like TNT or USA.
Okay.
And then obviously like Netflix has NXT outside of the United States. But yeah, it's on a broadcast over-the-air digital antenna network here. That's how I watch it every week through my little digital antenna, which is pretty rad. I like it. But like, it's in potentially far more homes than SmackDown can reach on the USA Network. I'm not really going to make that argument for Netflix because I feel like Netflix is probably in more houses than cable is at this point.
I believe it.
But the CW is just like, it's there. Like anybody can access it. It's 100% free. You have to pay nothing to access the CW network, either over air or through like their CW app that has NXT posted the next day. So like it's free. It's there. You'd have been in more rooms, and again, you would have shuffled back up eventually. That just seems to be how it works. They like to have these little switch arounds with commentary teams from time to time anyway. But yeah, but like like you said, like Jim Ross weighed in on it. Jonathan Coachman weighed in on it, where he talked about being in a similar situation where it's like, yeah, you're shuffled around, you're pushed down, it can be demoralizing. That's the business. It's not really always a personal thing, and maybe Corey took it personally. I don't know the guy. Like, I could see how you take it as a direct insult to your abilities and what you're capable of doing at your job. When I don't think this was a personal swipe at Corey Graves. I think it was strictly a business decision that was probably in large part pushed by Netflix.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, that's the catalyst. That's where it starts. Netflix, and then the shuffle works down from there.
Yeah. Like, it's all business. And I mean, I don't hold it against WWE that they haven't hired me yet. Like, it's just business. I get it. It's nothing personal. They just haven't clued into my awesomeness yet. It's fine.
Believe you me, I've had that dream of working in that writer's room for a very long time. Of course, then the more interviews with writers that I heard over the years made me want to do that a little bit less. But Vince isn't running things anymore, so maybe it's a little easier to navigate, and you don't have to hold in every sneeze or cough you ever have.
I'm sure Triple H isn't ripping up scripts 5 minutes before the show starts.
I'm going to be so concerned if we ever hear about him doing something like that. Like, that's...
Yeah,
Vince used to not be that way. That wasn't how Vince was, in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Like, in the 90s, you'd hear about, it would be him and Pat Patterson, Brother Love. like they would have like a big booking meeting every year and plan out the major steps for an entire year. Like,
Mhm.
and at some point he quit doing that, and it was just tear it up, let's do it all live. I love doing stuff live, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to book a wrestling show while it's actually airing on the USA Network.
Well, yeah, like I think when he lost the competition with WCW, and I don't mean like he definitely won the Monday Night War, but I mean he lost having competition
Mm-hmm.
and ended up having to compete with himself. Well, when all that money's still coming into your pocket, regardless of whether Raw or SmackDown wins, yeah, you're going to get complacent. So I think as long as AEW continues to thrive and any other rival promotion, like if anyone else gets a big boost that puts them on WWE's radar as someone who is a legitimate, not threat, but, you know, like they're getting a fair amount of legitimate attention, I think that's really going to only help them.
I agree, and weirdly enough, like even the major promotions here, WWE or AEW's, it's not just them. It's not just like WWE as a company and AEW as a company. It's AEW with these working agreements with other companies. It's WWE with these working agreements with other companies, and it's a little bit different than it was when it was just WWE and WCW. It's almost now it's kind of like there's these small conglomerates of wrestling companies kind of banding under the larger company for mutual benefit. And and unless you had anything else on the Corey Graves situation, I think that's a pretty good segue here.
The only thing that I think Corey would look, or Corey should look at an actual demotion, like if they flat out were like, you know what, you had the chance to work NXT, now you're going to work Evolve.
Oh man. We'll see.
Like, and nothing against Evolve. Like, God forbid. Like, it hasn't even, like, there is no Evolve yet. But if they put him down there just to make a point, then I think that would be the final straw for Corey. Yeah. He might just say, no,
who's doing commentary for LFG? Who's doing commentary on LFG? There's the question.
Probably some combination of Byron and maybe Vic, because they've been using it on main event.
Yeah, because Vic was on Level Up as well, so that would make sense.
No, he wasn't on Level Up. That was what was his name?
Did he not start on Level Up?
That might have been before I started watching Level Up. But what was the name of the guy who was doing Level Up? Because I liked him. He was good.
I did too. Hold on, I'm hitting back to my. Were we still doing? Hold on, I'm like rolling through my notebook here real quick. Okay.
His name's written down somewhere.
Blake Howard. Howard. And that's why we write things down, children. Is Blake Howard. Yeah, Blake Howard is good. So, like, if it's him and Byron on LFG, that'd be a fine continuation of that. And, seeing what they do with whatever the Evolve Level Up thing is going forward as well. But, yeah, if they shove Corey Graves to that, then he has an actual complaint to levy. But speaking of Evolve and these various promotional mixings and pairings, officially this week there have been working agreements we've seen, especially for those of you that love NXT like we do. You have seen a lot of pairings of TNA wrestlers or appearances of TNA wrestlers on NXT television, but officially on paper, press release and all, WWE and TNA now actually do have a contracted partnership, which is good. And I kind of wondered again if TKO Endeavor was like, look, we need this on paper. I get that in the wrestling business, it's a handshake agreement so often, but we actually need this to be written down. Okay, we need to know what the deal is, who's doing what, who's going where. But yeah, so officially TNA is partnered with. I don't necessarily want to say under the banner or a part of WWE, but partnered with WWE. We've seen a lot from this partnership already. but I think it's just going to increase from here. CJ, what do you think about them making it official here, and how that's going to, impact the talent exchange as we've seen it so far?
No pun intended. I think it's great for the wrestling business as a whole. Like we've seen more, I think, from the side of NXT going to TNA instead of TNA coming to WWE. Like we have seen some crossover on NXT television. Obviously, Joe Hendry, the Rascals, Jordan Grace, Masha Slamovich. Like there's definitely been TNA on NXT, but I mean, the amount of NXT that was showing up on TNA, I think a lot of people, especially if they don't actually watch TNA, they only get one side of that partnership where it's like, oh yeah, so WWE is just gonna rake them over the coals and raid their locker room, take all their talent. No, that's not what's happening here. Like it's genuinely a partnership.
Yeah.
And yeah, if they do end up signing some talent away from TNA, I'm sure some TNA talent would love the chance to join WWE.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some WWE talent that wants to cross the line to TNA.
Well, and there are certainly good fun there. But I think there's a lot of talent that looks at this as an opportunity, not just for even more exposure, but opportunity to work with wrestlers that they maybe thought they'd never actually get to cross paths with in a ring. And that's part of the fun of this as well. I mean, I think, we've got the Royal Rumble coming up here in just a couple of weeks, and I think that's going to be a little bit of a tell as to maybe what they're planning to do with some of this. Joe Hendry was a major part of NXT there for probably about 5 weeks. He was kind of on that TV program, and then he just kind of dropped off and went back to TNA, and I think that was on purpose. I think they kind of want to let people cool down on him so that a Royal Rumble appearance is more impactful. Again, no pun intended on that. But I do think that people are going to get a little accusatory when the inevitability of WWE signing someone away from TNA happens. I think we're going to see that with Jordan Grace. I 100% believe that she will be main roster WWE very, very soon. It's probably as soon as her. Yeah, they clearly have enjoyed working with her. They brought her in for multiple matches. I want to say she worked more matches on NXT than Joe Hendry did.
I would say so. I think Joe had more promos and segments than he did matches for sure. But yeah, even battling Ethan Page for the NXT title on a premium live event, that is a massive spotlight for an NXT talent to have. That's nothing to shake a stick at either. For them to put that kind of investment in an outside talent, not only once but twice, they did the same thing with Jordan Grace, battling Roxanne Perez, and even just the crossover potential with former WWE stars, the fact that NXT's Facebook page was promoting Genesis tonight so hard, seeing Nick Nemeth on an NXT page instead of Dolph Ziggler is even just the possibility of the stories that you can tell. If he comes back as Nick Nemeth with a chip on his shoulder and he wants to make the NXT locker room hell, brings his brother Ryan to do it, they capture the NXT tag titles, I'd be here for that. That would be fucking amazing.
Ryan's in full gremlin mode right now too. He is doing all of these underhanded heelish things, and Nick's not quite on board with it yet. But I would love to see that. I mean, because we've had talent that was WWE talent that has since gone to TNA, crossed back in to NXT.
Ash by Elegance.
Yeah, which I still, it's one of my little favorite Vic Joseph moments of him being, oh, it's Ash by Elegance.
No, it's not.
Fantastic. So yeah, there's just so much potential here for matches and angles and story. Do you think that with this partnership being officially put down onto paper and contractualized and all that, do you think that we'll see potentially more TNA talent appear on the main roster from time to time, or do you think it's still going to primarily be an NXT TNA?
Well, there was nothing in the press release to really indicate Raw or SmackDown having anything to do with the
Right.
talent agreement. They did specifically highlight WWE PLEs, but I think those are basically just going to be the big five and whatever NXT pay-per-views they have.
Right.
And I think that might be another reason for the rebrand from NXT pay-per-views to WWE, because then you have you can take it more literally that, yeah, they're showing up on WWE pay-per-views.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's still like the NXT ones that we know are NXT, even if they're not branded that way anymore.
Hey, if it's one thing pro wrestling loves, it's semantics. Like, it really is. Like, well, technically, that's the whole, like, well, if you're in a world title match at the opening of the card, you're still a main event. You're still a main event, even though you're the opening match. No. All right.
Fucking Michael Cole at Survivor Series being like, oh yeah, Roman pinned Solo in War Games, but he still has the Ulafala, so he's still the tribal chief. Fuck off. Like, you have to get that far into the weeds because you know people online are gonna do the same, so you have to beat them to the punch. What other industry can you say that really happens?
None industry. Not a one. Zero.
Oh,
God.
Man.
But
Tangent.
yeah,
But like, I'm working on my second one of these right now, and I don't know how many Canadian viewers we have, but these fucking Tim Hortons peach things are just fantastic. I'm on my second one today already.
CJ will be well caffeinated heading into the afternoon here.
No caffeine. It's straight up basically just like peach juice.
Oh, okay. I assumed it was a tea of some kind. Okay, all right.
No, they call them quenchers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully not as dangerous as the caffeine-laden lemonade from
That Panera Bread?
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that I don't think there's any Panera Breads in Canada, or at least any that are near me, because part of me really wants to try it. And I might die. I would be the kind to just like chug 3 of them and not realize until I'm halfway through my 4th that it's like, oh, I think my heart stopped.
Yeah. I'll drink coffee, but I don't really do like energy drinks or anything anymore. After years ago, our longtime viewers have heard me mention this before, but it'll be 4 years. Wait, 4 years? Yeah, it'll be 4 years come July since I stopped drinking. And part of the reason, other than just my abhorrent alcoholism, that I stopped was that my blood pressure was so bad that I was told by a medical professional that if I were also a cigarette smoker, I would have had a heart attack or a stroke by that point in time. So when I quit drinking booze, I'm like, oh, the energy drinks can't be helping the old BP either. So I cut all those out too. But I've slowly worked caffeine back in because I'm going to be 40 here in a few months, and I need the caffeine to live a functional adult life.
That's so valid. Like, it's some mornings, if like, I'm not a coffee drinker, but if I don't get a hot chocolate, if I need it, I'm just completely dead throughout, like, until I get one.
Until the sweet chocolate aroma lost.
God, just nothing hits like a Tim Hortons hot chocolate. Not sponsored. We're
yet.
I'm just a fan.
Just a fan. Of course, it's. I feel like you are like mandated by Canadian law to frequent Tim Hortons.
It's like at least it used to be once a day. Thankfully, they have rolled back the law in just because inflation. They're
Right.
oh, maybe we can't actually mandate daily, so we'll do once a week.
They
I
rolled back
gotta.
the law around the time they stopped rolling back the rim when they quit doing that promotion. Now it's just like you scan the code and check online.
So many
I'm
people
dating that.
don't
People
know
probably
what
don't even
roll up the
remember.
rim is.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
they're probably thinking some weird sex thing, but like no, it's not. Guys, once upon a time, you would get your coffee from Tim Hortons, and there was a section of the rim of the lid that you could roll up, and it would tell you if you won a free donut or a coffee or something like that, or $50,000, whatever it would be. That was the roll up the rim to win competition that they used to do every year, but it's kind of a waste of paper. So
Well, and like they still do the roll up the rims, but it's all digital now. It has been basically since COVID because nobody wanted to touch the saliva laden paper cup that is like, oh, hey, I want a free coffee. That's great. Picks up with tongs. Um, but but no, I think we've kind of rambled on about Tim Hortons and non-wrestling topics long enough. I did want to, since we're still talking about TNA, do you want to run down some of the matches for Genesis tonight?
yeah, let me look at the card pulled up in front of me here.
There's 9 matches, one on the pre-show. Frankie Kazarian versus Leon Slater. There are some names, because I haven't watched TNA in, unfortunately, longer than I care to admit. Like, I still follow it, but some of these names, I'm like, I don't know who the hell they are. I didn't know that Ash by Elegance has a Heather by Elegance
Yes,
tag team partner.
Yeah, it's
Like, who the fuck even is that?
I'm not sure, but it's also her personal concierge. This is where we need our corner reviewer Matt for things like this. Our TNA specialist here at Dirt Sheet Radio.
Well, and we did talk about, like, when we're talking about this show, we have talked about bringing in subject matter experts if we wanted to do like a TNA deep dive or an AEW deep dive, New Japan, anything that, like, if we are not equipped to handle those conversations, then yeah, we bring in someone else who can kind of guide us through why this thing is a big deal.
Right, exactly. Because sometimes, guys, there's a lot of wrestling that happens in the world, and as well versed as we like to view ourselves, there's only so many hours in the week to see wrestling, guys. But yes. So Ash does have a partner and concierge in Heather by Elegance. It's for the TNA Knockout Tag Team Championship, right?
Mm-hmm. They are, and like I don't know, really the story that they're telling either, but I think this is one of those moments where, kind of like with, Oba Femi and Julia winning their respective titles, like this feels like if they really want to make the most of the TNA NXT partnership, stack your champions with recognizable names that have been on the TNA brand or that have been on the NXT brand, and I think that will help with getting more fans on board.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that I'm just looking through the match card right now, like I think they're gonna know both Moose and Ace Austin regardless of who wins the X Division Championship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think either way they're going to be fine there. Same thing with Nick Nemeth, Joe Hendry, Masha Slamovich, Rosemary, the Hardys, the Rascals. Like, no matter who comes out with those tag titles, I expect any of those titles. I would expect to see them on on NXT television eventually.
Yeah, same. And I mean, especially like you said, like using the Hardys and the Rascals as example. You're like, clearly, like all four of those men have been, especially the Hardys. You're talking about modern day legends there, but like the Rascals were all over NXT for weeks. So like regardless of that scenario, it would be absolutely wild to see the Hardys show up on WWE television with the TNA tag title.
Could you imagine how loud that place is going to get if all of a sudden the Hardys music hits on a random Tuesday night and they walk out with the tag titles?
It would be wild. It's so fun that like these are all things that are like absolutely within the scope of possibility now. With this, let's see. So, what we got? You said Masha Slamovich and Rosemary.
Blockhouse Orange House of Fun match.
Which I love that they augment kind of the precursor to the House of Fun, depending on who is involved with it. Because once upon a time it was the Ravens House of Fun match, which was funny because they still called it that a couple times when Raven wasn't involved with them. So it'd be like Raven's House of Fun match that does not include Raven, is not in a house, and actually sometimes isn't fun. But that was an antiquated TNA. Once upon a time, guys, it was tough going over there. But I assume that Masha Slamovich will retain there. But again, Rosemary is someone that's been on NXT television as well. So
I wonder if they had to get permission to specifically call it a Clockwork Orange match.
Huh. That's a good question.
Because it's not like it's specifically Clockwork Orange. It's not a Clockwork Orange.
Okay. Sometimes that's all it takes to navigate the murky world of trademarks. Also, I'm not sure how old a Clockwork Orange is. The novel, I mean. Was it Anthony Burgess?
Yes, it was. Yeah. 1962. And then
there's no way that's public domain then. Okay, yeah. There was part of me for a second that's like, well, maybe it fell into public domain, but like, because for some reason I was thinking maybe it was around the same age as Brave New World, which I think was written in the early 20s. But so no, it's definitely not public domain then. Yeah.
1932.
Really? That late? I thought it was the 20s for some reason. Good grief. I bet y'all were expecting us to talk about some classic literature live on air, were you?
Immediately after a discussion about Tim Hortons. Like,
you never know where it's going to go here at Dirty Radio. But yeah, sorry, my English major was popping out of me there for a minute, guys. My apologies. But what else we have on the card tonight for TNA? Let's see, Eddie Edwards and Brian Myers taking on Eric Young and Steve Macklin for the tag titles. Again, all names and faces that are familiar all across all scopes of wrestling there.
I really would love to see Eric Young in particular back in NXT. Like, I know that he's been very outspoken about working for Vince, and maybe now that Vince is gone, he'd be more willing to come back to the Performance Center, but he's one that was big for me as a TNA fan in the mid 2000s. Him, and of course I got to shout out Christopher Daniels. His retirement match in a Texas death match against Hangman Adam Page on Collision, just chef's kiss, wonderful. That's a guy who has absolutely earned his retirement.
Oh yeah, it's Christopher Daniels is just absolutely amazing performer. Has a lot of wisdom and instruction to impart on future generations of wrestlers. And as my buddy Randall said, this brings to an end Christopher Daniels' 643-year career as a professional wrestler.
How long?
643 years. That's an old. That's a deep cut. For those of you that don't know, friends and other wrestlers that have been around Christopher Daniels, they've referred to him as being an old man since around 1999. Like, they were calling him Old Man Daniels in the Ring of Honor locker room. Like, it's not new. So it's kind of a running gag there on Christopher Daniels, because he hasn't. That being said, they can call him that because he hasn't really visibly aged in 25 years. So,
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, fantastic match. If you haven't checked it out, be sure to check that out. But yeah, back on Eric Young, I'd love to see him pop back over. And yeah, he didn't like Vince, which is more than understandable. Eric Young's had, I think, one of those undersung careers. Like, he has had an incredible career as a performer, especially if you look at everything he did in TNA, the shifts and changes of his character over the years, from, Team Canada to, just a frightened little man who would fall down every time his pyro went off, the don't fire Eric era of Eric Young's career there. He's an amazing
His
performer.
tag team with ODB.
Oh my god! I forgot that they had like a love angle with them. Oh, that was glorious.
They were Knockouts tag champs.
Yeah, they were. Oh man. Oh god. And
wild.
Good times, guys. Good times. Good old EY. Good old EY. Let's see. So, and then on top of the card tonight, as we said, Nick Nemeth, formerly Dolph Ziggler, which I always thought the name Dolph Ziggler was one of the things that held him back because it was a horrible name. Nick Nemeth was always a much better name. But here we are. What was it when he was in OVW before he got brought up and became Dolph? He was the natural Nick Nemeth, which was like great, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make him cheerleader. And then
well, is that treading on Dustin Rhodes' territory a little bit, being the natural?
Yeah, it could have been. Shoot, but I mean, like, that was OVW, not FCW. I was like, well, hell, maybe Dusty gave him the name, but no, that would have been OVW. So probably Al Snow. Being like, we're going to call you the natural.
Well, and what was his name when he was Kerwin White's caddy?
Did he have a name?
I thought
he
might have. Well, now I need to look that up.
I thought he was just the caddy, but I could be wrong about that. Man, I haven't thought about Kerwin White in a minute either.
Good old Chavo.
Oh, man. Yeah, and then, well, gosh, that character got dropped real quick because of Eddie's death. They're like, we can't have Chavo doing this. He's a Guerrero again.
Yeah, I don't see that he had a name. Or at the very least, it just says he became his caddy. Yeah. But he might have also been Nick Nemeth with a K.
Okay. But yeah, so we've got Nick with a C, as it is now. Nick Nemeth taking on Joe Hendry for the TNA World Championship. And again, I don't think Joe Hendry's going to stay in TNA for like too much longer. I don't think he's going to get that World Championship. I could be wrong, but I don't necessarily see that happening.
I don't think it would happen at this particular time, but I think if they really did want to, celebrate Joe Hendry for the work that he has put into TNA, because over the last year, he has done some tremendous work. And I think if they really wanted to give him his flowers before he left, even just like 2 months with the title, and I think if they did want to kind of have him cross the other line from TNA to NXT, being the NXT champion and having him lose the title because of interference from an NXT superstar. Yeah. That might be a good jumping point for getting his first NXT feud.
Yeah.
Or first feud as a full-fledged NXT.
Right. Yeah, that would work very well. And I mean, and if, again, just considering kind of the little bit of story with Nick and his brother, Ryan being kind of more heelish right now, that could kind of be the catalyst here tonight. Maybe Nick goes full evil, does something really dastardly to beat Joe Hendry, which that's instant heat, because who doesn't like? Are there people that don't like Joe Hendry? Like, I know there's always somebody
Sure.
that wants to poo-poo something, but like, I feel
Mhm.
like people generally really like him.
I feel like he gets lumped in with Orange Cassidy as far as gimmicks that almost shouldn't work, but really, really do. And I think that's part of where, if anybody has anything bad to say about Joe Hendry, it's that.
Right. That's just it. He's character first, wrestler
Mhm.
second. Which, I mean, that makes sense when you hear him in interviews talk about kind of how he became interested in wrestling. It wasn't the wrestling that originally brought him into to it as a fan. It was, I think, the video games, and then he was, kind of equating the relationship between an on-stage, rock performer to, how a wrestler interacts with the crowd, and then he kind of created everything that he does from that. So he is different. Still good in the ring though. Like, yeah, he's not Bryan Danielson between the ropes, but
No.
he's good. He's good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've never really heard anybody say anything super bad about him. But yeah, being mean to Joe Hendry, that's going to get you booed. So if they want to go with that,
I still appreciate the they had a segment with him and Gallus in the back where they really leaned into that say his name and he appears thing. Like I think it was Wolfgang said his name by accident and the coffees are like no, but this music already started playing. It was too late. And then he just sidles in from the side of the frame and like it was a really good production moment too. Like the fact that they were able to cut it so cleanly and Joe just picked it up right after the claps. Like nothing was out of the ordinary. Like he didn't just teleport in because someone said his name.
Right. It's a lot of fun, and it's a little tongue in cheek. But so from that perspective, I can see people kind of putting him in a similar gimmick camp as an Orange Cassidy, where it is just like, but it's wrestling. Suspension of disbelief is a major part of the sport.
So we kind of talked a little bit about it. Last night I went to an indie show. Shout out to Canadian Wrestling's Elite. They ran a show in my home province, and they did an absolutely terrific job. But their main event was a steel cage match, and one of the competitors, his whole gimmick was walking out with a bottle of maple syrup on his belt. And like during the match, the crowd was chanting syrup at him. Like, and then like he was fighting to get to the corner where the syrup was. It was essentially like
Popeye and spinach.
that was exactly the comparison that I made to the guy sitting behind me. Like, because he was like leading the charge on the syrup chants, and I'm like, is that essentially like his Popeye spinach? And he's like, yeah. It was funny too. One of the women that he was sitting with, I brought my girlfriend with me, and so we're sitting in the front row. They're sitting behind us. This one woman, it's like no context at all. I did not know who. I think his name is Bobby Schick. Sweet Bobby Schick was the guy's name, and he was. I'll shout out the other guy too. He was going up against the Rebel Bobby Collins, and so I was obviously rooting for Bobby because I knew one of them was going to win either way.
Right.
But she asks me something to the effect, she mentioned something to the effect of like, did you get on your hands and knees and beg for the syrup? I'm like, ma'am, that is a personal question. How dare you ask me that in public? And then, then we get to this match and it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. But no, it was an absolutely fantastic match. It was CWE at its finest. Shout out to those folks there. They did a tremendous job. We'll have to tag them in something. I told them before I left I was gonna shout them out today.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. Like Love it, man. Like, and that's one thing we don't talk a lot about on a lot of the Dirt Sheet Radio programs is the really thriving independent wrestling scene nowadays. It's a lot healthier than it used to be. And there's shows everywhere, guys. Like I can almost guarantee, no matter where you are, in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, there are independent wrestling shows happening near you, and you're doing yourself a really, really big disservice if you don't go to these at least a couple times. It's like it's a different environment. It's much different just aura about these shows, especially if you go on a regular basis. You really do start to form these like friendships and bonds, not just with like the people in the audience, but you really get connected to the talent on these shows. And then it's oh so bittersweet when they move from those independent promotions and you start seeing them on television. But it's a wonderful thing, guys. It's a wonderful thing to get to say. Like, it's such a hipster thing, honestly. To say, like, well, I saw this guy or gal, when they were in their literal third match, it went 95 seconds. And they lost to, whatever, legend they brought in to work their shows. They lost to Tori Wilson in 90 seconds.
There was and we were talking a little bit about it too. One of the they had a CWE main event. Like they're on their 16th anniversary tour right now, and one of their earliest main events was Bryan Danielson versus Tyler Black. Like they brought the stars out early. The guy who owns it, Danny Duggan, shout out Hotshot. He was a former tag partner of Kenny Omega. Like, they were based out of Winnipeg. Kenny wrestled for CWE when he was still doing the independents before he got big in Japan. So these independent stars literally can show up as the stars of tomorrow. And if you go to these indie shows, you can be like, I saw them back when 5 people knew who they were.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what an incredible, older main event to be able to shout out for CWE. Tyler Black and Brian, good Lord. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm talking about, guys. Like, you really, look, I mean, if you're a wrestling fan and you just want to watch, your big scale productions, your big main companies, sure, go for it. Like, I'm not going to, say somebody isn't a fan because what they choose to watch. That's silly. It's tribalistic and it's silly. But you really should be checking out independent promotions when you can. It's good for everybody. It's healthy for them. It's healthy for you to get out of the house, leave your house, and go watch some wrestling. Damn it!
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to find any match card that can. Oh, you know what? I'm looking through this post right now. There were some CWE DVDs and CWE No Boundaries, the first ever show. Oh, so it wasn't Brian versus Tyler. It was Bryan Danielson versus CMLL star Mentalo, who, by the way, is the current CWE champion. He defended against Danny Duggan last night. And then they had they had a Ring of Honor World Championship match. Mentalo challenging Austin Aries.
Okay, all right.
JJ Sanchez versus the Road Dogg Jesse James. Demolition versus the Fabulous Freebirds versus the Supreme Madonnas versus the Strippendales.
So first of all, I need to know more about the Strippendales. That's a team that I've heard very little about.
Bobby Fox and Matt Fairlane.
Matt Fairlane sounds familiar. Maybe it's just the Fairlane aspect of that.
But yeah, they have some really big names. They just ran a show with Nick Dinsmore in Ontario, and they have some shows coming up with Rene Dupree.
Oh, right on. Rene Dupree.
Yeah. Man, yeah, like that's one of those guys too. Like, if we can just take another second to talk about like the stars of WWE TV that go back to the indie scene, and just keep at it. Like, even decades later, I remember watching La Resistance growing up, and I remember just hating them so much. I don't know if it was because
Was it Fifi the Poodle? Was it the Poodle?
It might have been the Poodle. I've come around on dogs, like yippy dogs as a whole, like except Chihuahuas. Those ones are literally just rats with vocal cords. But
I have 4 dogs, and they're all Chihuahua mixes, CJ. They're good dogs. Now, granted, Maurice is like only like 26% Chihuahua, and he's like a 30-pound dog. Like, he's, but he's big.
And I mean, obviously, your dogs are the exception. I mean,
everyone loves Molly. That's really what it comes down to.
Oh yeah, Molly is the only reason people tune in on Tuesdays.
Don't say that.
Because it's true.
There are a couple people in the chat week after week on Mondays and Tuesday nights who are always asking about Molly. But yeah, was it Fifi the Poodle, which got a Raw Deal card when Raw Deal was being printed as a collectible card game. Fifi was in that game, so.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The fact that Rene Dupree was in Raw Deal, they made just about everybody eventually. If you were under contract with WWE during the time that game was being printed, you were probably put into the game at some point.
There was, I remember a particular CWE tour where they brought in Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and to hear it from them, like, he just bailed on the tour like partway through and was just like, no, I'm gonna take my deposit and just bail. And they managed to bring in D'Lo Brown to make up those dates, and it was amazing. Like, I caught one of the shows, and it was just next level. Like, the crowds were intense. Even the kids last night, like, they were. That's the other thing about Bobby Schick. After the match, he climbs up to the top of the cage. He's got his bottle of maple syrup. He's just pouring it like into kids' mouths from the top of the cage. And I just like, I hope that it was actually making it into their mouths and not staining their clothes or getting in their hair.
Man.
Parents would have been pissed.
Oh, God. So, like, then I feel that his greatest nemesis as someone wielding maple syrup would be Isaac Yankem DDS. That's who. The dentist is his greatest enemy. Oh, my God. That's fantastic, though. That's better than, it's better to be pouring maple syrup on your children than when I went to ECW when I was 12 and the Sandman was just pouring beer on children.
There was a guy last night who came out and literally just like opened up a bottle of water and just like sprayed it on one section of the crowd. Oh my God. The first match after the intermission, I'm going to have to go back afterwards and try and find this guy's name. He gets to the ring, and then he looks out into a section of the crowd, and immediately he bails out of the ring. He goes over to this kid in the crowd. He starts beaking this kid until he cries, and then goes back into the ring. I'm like, how? Like, how do you as a person, first of all, just be like, I'm going to go out and make that kid cry? But at the same time, that was so fucking good. He full on just went out and made that kid cry a couple times throughout the match. Like, I was looking at this kid and he'd be sitting there enjoying the match. And then I look over again like 30 seconds later and he's still crying.
It's a lesson to learn as a child at a wrestling show that heels are heels.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be
No
mean to you.
exceptions.
They will be mean to you. That's fantastic, though. Like, hopefully, it doesn't turn the kid off of being a wrestling fan. He can just, carry that with him. I was an adult the time that Steve Carino looked me dead in the eye and told me, "No, you shut the fuck up, asshole." And that was one of my favorite things that's ever happened to me at a wrestling show. So, like, but you view these things differently.
There was a house show for Monday Night Raw that came to my my city before the pandemic hit, and I end up sitting beside this guy that was like a couple grades younger than me, but we went to the same school. And he's got the classic big gold belt on his shoulder. This was when Seth Rollins was leading his stable with AOP and Buddy Murphy, and all of a sudden this guy comes up and like he stands up, he starts trying to beef with Seth, but then he calls him like a faggot, and Seth's just like, get this fucking piece of shit out of here. Like,
Good
was
God.
holding back. He's just like, either you sit the fuck down or I'm gonna get you hauled out. Like, he was sitting like 2 chairs down from me and my sister, and I was just like, I don't know him. He's not with us. Like, that was the first time that I genuinely went to a wrestling show and was like, I might actually see someone get kicked out. This is wild.
Yeah. It's okay. Apparently, as it turns out, Seth Rollins does not mess around when it comes to homophobic slurs. Jeez,
Nope.
crazy, man. That's good. That's good that Seth is that way, though. I give Seth a few more points. I'll say good for him for not tolerating stuff like that. But
Oh, yeah.
Good God, I don't think I've ever seen someone get thrown out of a wrestling show. I've also never seen like a fight actually happen at a wrestling show either. The closest thing to like I feel slightly unsafe, there might be a problem that I came. It was a Ring of Honor show. Main event was Jay Briscoe. It's when he was world champion. I can't remember who he was wrestling, but it was like a street fight scenario, and he like pulled the ramp apart to use part of the ramp as a weapon, and asked for a chair, which quickly became people starting to toss chairs over the guardrail, and my mind just starts flashing to that ECW scene
Yep.
of Terry Funk and Cactus Jack, and it was like, oh my God, like,
And
this
literally
is
they
crazy.
just plaster the ring with chairs.
Luckily it didn't quite get to that point. It calmed down. Security was pretty intense at these shows, like telling people to like set their chairs back down. But yeah, that's probably the closest. But hey, these smaller shows, guys. That was back when Sinclair owned Ring of Honor. They could get away with a little bit more. But,
Oh yeah. The heydays of Ring of Honor.
the good old days, guys. Well, there's still a lot of good talent there. It's still a lot of work. It's still a lot of good work going on. But it's just just kind of often feels like AEW light at this point when they do it. Like,
well, definitely. Like, it's especially when you have like AEW shows that feature Ring of Honor, and it's like, yeah, okay. But then when the Ring of Honor shows feature AEW, it almost feels like I'm trying to think of an apt comparison, but it's like if Walmart decided to promote their services in a mom and pop grocery store.
yeah. I mean, like, one of my big things for the whole kind of like ROH to AEW thing is like Athena not being on AEW television when she should be, because like she's arguably one of the best women's wrestlers on the planet, has been for a while, and it's just like she's a megastar, and you like basically hide her.
How long has she been champion for now? I'm just looking it up right now.
Date 1, December 10th, 2022.
Jesus.
So she's over the 2-year mark as Ring of Honor Women's Champion. It's kind of inexcusable that she's not being used on a much larger stage. everything she does is good. And that was one of the first times I was ever rendered silent at a wrestling show. It was the Night of Hoopla that was, all booked and done by Truth Martini for Ring of Honor. It was a show out in Chicago. And she was on the card, and she did that like corkscrew stunner off the top rope, and I don't think I spoke for like 45 seconds. It was just I'd never seen a move like that. That was a fun night. That's when she also played the part of Sherry Martel for the Black Machismo that night. Yeah, that was when I got to watch the Black Machismo wrestle Delirious, and they just reenacted Macho Man and Ultimate Warriors match from WrestleMania.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Jay Lethal hit the top rope elbow drop, and Macho Man hit 4 of those at that Mania match. And he hits the elbow drop, pops up, and the crowd starts chanting 3 more times.
That's
and he
awesome.
climbs back up, drops it again, 2 more times. And he looked really frustrated with us. I also saw Delirious eat pizza off the floor.
Suspect.
Yeah, keep in mind this event was inside of a bar, so it wasn't.
Oh,
yeah,
bar floor pizza.
Yeah, bar floor pizza for Delirious. Oh, man. Good times. But no, like Athena not being used in a more productive way, I feel like is just egregious. But hey,
well, especially like she's your longest running champion right now. Like, why wouldn't you want to focus her more heavily? Yeah. I get wanting to, and this is kind of a problem that I think they have, that WWE has, that I'm certain to an extent TNA has as well, where you have too much talent. Mm-hmm. Like, we see the same 12 talent that shows up on your weekly shows, that obviously, like, you want to build the show around them, and that's fine. But then what about the other 60 people that haven't been on TV in months? Like, I would much rather see them get the opportunity to do an Omos, go to Pro Wrestling Noah, take advantage of other opportunities outside of your primary company to wrestle. Like, you're a wrestler, so go fucking wrestle.
And especially like using Omos as an example there, that's a good example of someone who needs to get those reps in and go somewhere like Japan. You hear a lot of wrestlers talk about that, how like after they do that first tour in Japan, they view wrestling a little bit differently. They work a little bit differently. And that's not just someone at like the level of an Omos. Like Brock Lesnar said that after he worked Japan after, leaving WWE years and years ago. Like Kurt Angle, like it changes kind of how you view yourself as a wrestler and what kind of work I think you'll put in. And Omos is definitely one of those guys that should learn to work more, because he is just staggeringly impressive as a man. Like, he's enormous. And I mean, from that special attraction angle, which they started booking him as more of a special attraction there the last couple of years. You wouldn't see him on TV every week because you shouldn't see someone like that on TV every week.
Right.
That's kind of, I think, you can argue about who the best big men wrestlers in history are, and I think a lot of people will come down on Paul White as having been one of the best, if not the best. But, like, I think one of the things that hurt his career, other than him turning face and heel 37 times over the course of 8 years, one of the bigger things that hurt him was that he was on TV every single week. And he shouldn't have been. Like, you stop being as impressed by someone's just sheer size when you see it all the time. That's why Andre would go to a territory and be there for a while and then leave. And then go to a territory and be there for a while and then leave. That's just, now granted, modern wrestling doesn't quite work the same way, but you can still figure out how to book someone and use them as more of a special attraction type role. And it's a really big deal when they appear for that reason. So, like, Omos should be kind of in that camp. He's not going to have, 5-star matches. He's not the best bout machine. Never will he be.
How dare you slander Omos like that?
I'm so sorry, Omos. I'm not going to do it to his face. I'll say that. I'm not going to be like, look, dude, you can really learn to sell better. And that's how I get ripped in half. Like,
you need to learn to sell better.
Right. Let me stand up on this stool. And
oh God, that same Raw house show. I remember Zelina Vega was still managing Angel Garza, and so I can't even remember what I said, but then she turns around and starts beaking at me, and I'm still sitting in my chair, and all I tell her is, stand up when you're talking to me. And there's like a group of people just around that just burst out laughing, and I see the look in Zelina's eyes, like she stood there for a second and then just like turned away, and I'm just like, man, did I break Zelina? I really hope I broke Zelina.
Oh, good times.
And that's the fun of like indie shows, because nobody gives a shit. Like there's no cameras. They're just having fun for the sake of having fun.
Yep. Talking about like going back to again when Ring of Honor was much more independent. One of the reasons that I became such a mega fan of Kevin Steen, or Kevin Owens as he's been for years now, was his crowd work at those Ring of Honor shows. Like, I'd never seen a wrestler jaw that much with the crowd as he did at that time, and he still does it. He still does it at house shows and such. He still will talk to the crowd a lot, especially if he knows like they're on commercial and stuff on a live show. There's less leeway that you have. Like he can't like call people motherfuckers sitting in the front row anymore.
Especially now that everybody's got a cell phone.
Right, yeah, that changes a lot of it. I mean, he talked about getting in trouble forever ago the first time he worked at Chikara's show. Because they were like, look, Kev, we know your style, we get what you do, but this is a much more family-oriented environment that we run here at Chikara, so please don't curse. And like he said, the like first thing he did just by instinct in the match was he like, I don't remember who he was working. Maybe like Kid Icarus or something, but like he shoves him and he just goes, "Come on, motherfucker!" And like he said, a hush just went over the crowd as these children looked just shocked at what came out of his mouth. Good times.
I love it.
But before we get rolling out of here, we did say we want to talk real quickly about how we're feeling about Netflix and Raw being together here. We're rolling into our third week of the rebranding of Raw, but Raw being moved to the world's largest streaming platform. CJ, how are you feeling? We're 2 weeks in, heading to the third. How do you think they're doing with Raw? Obviously, the first week was a much larger presentation as was the first go. It felt like it was about glad handing the Netflix executives kind of the way everything was structured. You didn't see that at all on week 2, and week 2 felt much more like a normal but still elevated Monday Night Raw. But how are you feeling about it thus far?
I'm fine with it. Like my experience, I think, is going to be different than yours, just being that international audience. I think Raw in itself is going to be uniform across the globe. And I think as far as Raw goes, yeah, they have a really good handle on it. The fact that they did a 2.5-hour show last week, what are your thoughts on that?
I liked it. It kept me guessing. It's wild is that they went 2.5 hours, but still reportedly went a little bit long from the Penta segment. He apparently went a little bit longer than he was supposed to, but like, does that really matter in this modern era of Netflix? I liked the 2.5 hour. We've talked a lot about the 3-hour Raws and how that would often feel a little stagnant by the end of that 3 hours. And then also, one of the complaints about the 2-hour era there for the last few months on USA was you knew when it was going to end. You knew exactly when the show was going to stop. And this 2.5 hour time frame this week I really like it from the perspective of I didn't know when the main event was actually going to conclude. And I like that. I like, not looking at the clock and being like, all right, we're right. It's 9:58 and 45 seconds. We're going to be out of here real soon. 1, 2, 3, the show's over. I like not expecting the end of a match as much. I do wonder, though, what the running average will be going forward. We went about 3 hours that first time. We went 2.5 last week. We'll see what we do tomorrow night. I'm hoping that 2.5 is kind of the standard. That feels good. It's long enough that you can get more done without blowing completely the suspension of disbelief for how some matches will end or when they will end. But you're also not going to get that real drag. Now, that being said, some weeks they blow through 3 hours and it didn't feel like 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And with the amount of talent that they have, they could make it work. But I like that 2.5. I liked it a lot.
It feels like it's enough time to get through all your business and still have an entertaining show without like a drag or a drain on the viewer. But one of the things that I find irritating about the Netflix era isn't the runtime of the show itself. It's some of the production things. Like, if you watched the NXT Rewind this past Tuesday, John and I talked for a little bit about how the ad structure in the US versus internationally. Like, there are times where Netflix will just mute the commentators because they have an ad read that is irrelevant to the international market, which is fine. It sucks for me as and I'm a very auditory person. So if I know something sounds off, it really irks me. Yeah. And this past NXT, they must have had an ad read right off the jump of the show. And Vic and Booker were muted for the first 20 minutes of the show because someone hit mute during the ad read and didn't unmute them.
Oh, wow.
Until a couple minutes into the first match.
That must have been incredibly perplexing and frustrating from your end. Because, I'm like, if I'm not hearing something, I'm trying to figure out, is my internet messed up? Is it the device I'm watching it on? What's going on? Wow, that's it was not great that they had that happen.
It was just the commentary that was muted. I still got music. I still got arena audio. I still got audio from promos and ring announcer and whole 9 yards. It was literally just Vic and Book who were muted.
Wow. Well, hopefully that's not a ongoing issue. Hey, you know what, though? We've had that happen. I mean, there's been more than a few times where I've been, welcoming folks to the shows and they can't hear a damn thing out of my mouth. It happens to us. We all get muted from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
But, man, on a production scale as large as that. Now, I would have to assume that was a Netflix thing that caused that then.
Because if it was a WWE thing, I feel like they would have been muted.
It would have been a wider audio issue.
But I don't know how their trucks operate. Obviously, they'll have one director for the whole show. They'll have multiple switchers for each broadcast. They'll have a CW switcher. They'll have a Netflix switcher. And, any other international markets where they're not on Netflix, I'm sure they'd have to have their own production thing as well. Right. The other thing that irks me about it, though, is the international market. I love the fact that international markets for Raw get continuance of the action. US gets a commercial break, we get more of the match. Right. And for NXT and SmackDown, they don't do that. They just go to this "we'll be right back" screen with a slideshow of superstars.
Yeah.
So consistency is what I would like to see as far as that goes. I also just downgraded to the ad tier Netflix because holy shit, it's so much less expensive.
Right.
And like the amount of ads that I get while watching other programs, it's minimal. So
I will say the Raw ads have been no different than how USA handled it from the American perspective on Netflix. It's the same kind of cuts. It was funny because the first Netflix, like my wife turns to me at one point, she's like, "I thought we didn't have ads on our Netflix." I'm like, "Yeah, we don't. This is different. Like the contract works different for this." So like it feels the same. My issue with the way the ads are working in the US is that we've missed a couple little storyline points that were not explained on air otherwise. The example I'll give is the original planned debut for Penta, as we were assuming it was going to be as Rey Mysterio's tag partner against the New Day, which I'm glad they didn't do that for a bunch of reasons. However, on the American broadcast of Raw, there was no mention as to why that match was not taking place. Internationally, the New Day was interviewed in front of the audience by, I want to say, I don't know if it was Kathy Kelly or Jackie Redmond, I didn't see it.
I think it was Jackie.
But they explained that this crowd wasn't worthy of them wrestling in front of. So they weren't going to be wrestling that night. And it's a really
US didn't get that
thing. Yeah, we didn't get it. We just had no explanation as to why that match didn't happen. And then, the closest thing we got was when they, had Chad Gable say that he wanted a luchador the next week. We're like, oh, that's what they was going to be doing. But so there are things like that. And then another example would be Tuesday night on the CW. Bayley's speech was cut in the middle on the CW broadcast, but was concluded in full on the Netflix broadcast. So, and it was a difference of like 30 seconds, but still, she was in the middle of a sentence when it cut on the CW feed. So there are, like you were saying, there's some inconsistencies that they need to kind of close the gaps on. But
yeah, and I mean, maybe that'll get ironed out in time. Maybe that will get ironed out the more programming comes to Netflix as opposed to cable. Well, yeah, there's absolutely going to be people from NXT showing up on Genesis. Like they've started promoting that. And yeah, like we talked about it earlier, NXT Socials talking about TNA Genesis. There's definitely going to be an NXT presence. We just don't know what it is yet.
Like I think that we're going to be basically, this is a weird way to put it, but TNA and NXT have been holding hands for a while, but they're going to interlock the fingers now, guys. It got more serious, okay?
It's officially official now.
Yeah, they are Facebook official. Yeah. Exactly.
Man, that same mind.
Exactly. That's why we miss doing these shows, guys. But hey, CJ, man, before we get out of here today, were there any other things that you wanted to touch on or discuss?
We talked about doing a sign of the week segment, but I don't know if
I have a couple pictures lined up here, real quick. Our sign of the week segment's more fun because we're not going to show a bunch of inane shit in the crowd. Now, granted, as signs, I love signs. If you've been a long-time wrestling fan, you know that people put a lot of work and effort into these things, sometimes more than others. And obviously, signs aren't quite what they used to be, as with censorship at these shows and things. They will pull objectionable signs. One of my all-time favorites I remember seeing, 1997, when I was a kid, there was a sign that read, "Bret Hart humps cows." And you're never going to see something like that again. This was during the Shawn Michaels-Bret Hart feud. This was an American audience, obviously saying that would never fly in Canada.
No, of course not. We respect our cows and Bret Hart too much for that.
That's right. But so I had a couple from the week that I saw, one from Raw and one from AEW Dynamite Maximum Carnage this week. But the Raw one that came up, just as a Lord of the Rings fan, boil and mash them, stick them in the stew has no meaning or context for what is going on, but it still got time on air. So I was definitely feeling the potato son. And then
was it could it have been applied to the context of Punk and Rollins in the ring somehow?
maybe maybe they're implying that some legitimate potatoes, using the Pro Wrestling Insider term for actually hitting someone. Maybe they're insinuating that some potatoes were being tossed between Seth Rollins and CM Punk. But I very much enjoyed that. And then I just get the little like old internet song that someone synced up and that stuck in my head. And then the hobbits are taken to Isengard. It's a whole thing, and the rabbit hole gets fallen down. Over on the AEW side of things, this I actually think was a more creative sign than boil and mash and stick them in a stew. This young man, here with my dad to see my father. Dad in quotations. The kid's dad doesn't look thrilled to be a part of this.
Well, and I mean, like, I see the curly hair, I see the MJF scarf. Like, is the implication that that's Max's kid? Like,
I didn't even think about that.
Or is he another one of Christian's kids? Like, I don't know.
Oh my god. To be determined, I guess. Maybe one of the unsolved mysteries of professional wrestling we'll have there. But I liked both of those this week a lot. I thought that those were a lot of fun. And CJ, I told you that our segment on this would be far less inane than Wade and Joe talking about it.
100%.
Are they doing that?
I mean, like, I didn't watch SmackDown this past week, or at least I haven't yet. So I'm not 100% sure, but I do remember seeing. There was a sign. I'm wondering if that was gonna make it into your sign.
I didn't have an image. I'm starting to. I don't know. Can you hear me okay, CJ? I'm getting some serious lag going on here on mine. I don't know if that's just on me or if.
I mean, your audio looks like it's syncing up with your video. Maybe that's okay. the sign that we. Maybe that's the sign that we're done for this premiere episode.
Yeah, okay, you just freed back up. You're looking a little fuzzy there, but I can see you and hear you now. But yeah, guys, this is a good kind of stopping point. I should say. But hey, if you enjoyed what you saw here, I've got some stellar news for you. We're not just here bringing in a brand new show, but Dirt Sheet Radio is here every day of the week. We are here Monday nights for Raw, Tuesdays for NXT, Wednesdays for Dynamite, Thursdays for TNA Impact, Fridays for SmackDown, Wednesday night, late into the night, you can always check out the Dirt Sheet Radio flagship program, and then on Sundays, DJ and I are going to be bringing the Weekend Wrestling Roundup every week, and also on Sundays, the crew over at 3NP bringing a lot of fun, and they'll be later today, so be sure to tune in live for all of those shows if possible. If not, watch us on the back end. We like it no matter what. We just appreciate you tuning in. DJ, where can the folks find you next out there?
Well, I mean, I'll be here Tuesday nights rewinding NXT, and yeah, here on Sundays, just talking about wrestling in general. This was a really fun, chaotic first episode. If it's a sign of things to come, I'm here for it, man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We had a lot of fun. I don't have Molly in here before we go, but this is Celeste, the celestial biscuit maker. She's the little black kitty that lives in this room. She's been really quiet and well-behaved all show. But
I didn't even know she was there.
Right? But I'm Tyler, the Pro Wrestling Hamster. That is obviously in here. But I'll be back tomorrow night for Monday Night Raw. Guys, we appreciate the hell out of you being here with us. And CJ and I will be back next week. We're not going to disappear again. We promise, guys, we'll be back. This was a lot of fun, CJ. Just getting to do these weekends shows with you, brother. But,
Oh, yeah.
guys, thank y'all so much. We'll be back live. Well, hey, we'll be back live later today with 3 and T, but I'll be back Monday night. You did what you say. Have a wonderful night, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Yeet.